We'll get started. We have the regular board meeting and agenda in front of us. The consent agenda items. This is your opportunity to remove anything out of the consent agenda items if there's something you think needs discussion. Not seeing any hands for that, so could I get a motion to approve the agenda? Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to the consent agenda, corporate issues. Looking for a motion on that, please. Moved, seconded, thank you. All in favor? Great. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to consent agenda development services. A motion on that one? Moved, seconded, thank you. All in favor? Great. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to B1, which is development services, untidy, unsightly bylaw enforcement. I'm going to turn it over to the CAO.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek direction from the Regional District Board regarding enforcement against property owners of 356 Highway 97, legally described as Plan 6421, District Lot 2695, in relation to 2 expired building permits and 1 stop work order notice. And the recommended administrative recommendation is that a notice on title pursuant to Section 57 of the Community Charter be filed against the title of lands described as Lot 1, Plan 6421, District Lot 2695, due to certain works having been undertaken on the lands contrary to the Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen Building Bylaw Number 2805, 2028, and that injunction action be commenced against the property owner if after December 19th, 2024, the property is not in compliance with the Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen Bylaw Number 2805, 2028. Staff is here to answer your questions.
Okay. Director Gettins, I'm going to go to you for this one. Direction on this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I just get some clarity around the December 19th deadline and just what came before that, because it's a pretty tight turnaround.
Okay, that was a question.
Yeah.
I'll look to staff if they can answer that. Go ahead.
Sorry, so my understanding is that it's a typical 2-week turnaround from the point at which the board's asked to consider this to further action being taken, and I believe that can possibly be simply in the form of submitting a building permit application in order to try to bring it into compliance.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. I appreciate that. I'll move the administrative recommendation, please.
Okay, moving it, seconded. It's on the floor. Generally speaking, this is an opportunity for the applicants, those affected, to address the board if they are in the room. Is the property or owner of that property here or online? Adam, are you seeing anybody online? That I don't know. Chris might be able to. Not seeing them? Okay. So nobody there. Any discussion on this? Back to the board. Seeing no hands, this is a corporate vote. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to development services, rural land use matters. Item C1, DVP in Area D, CAO.
Thank you. This application is seeking a variance to the front parcel line setback that applies to the subject property in order to facilitate the placement of a manufactured home and the construction of an associated carport. And the administrative recommendation is that the development variance permit 2024.03 to allow the development of a principal dwelling unit within the front setback at 4838 Bassett Avenue, Okanagan Falls, be approved. Staff's here to answer questions.
Okay, go to Director Taylor. Direction on this one?
Yeah. Generally in agreement with staff, I'd like to refer this to my APC.
Okay, so you're asking to send it to the APC. It's moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? This makes it a corporate vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Over to C2, another DVP in Area D, CAO.
Thank you. This application is seeking a variance to the subdivision requirement that applies to the subject property in order to undertake a two-lot subdivision. And the recommendation is that the development variance permit D 2024.034 to allow for a 532 square parcel to be created through subdivision without underground writing and wiring and pre-ducting at 1205 Maple Street, Okanagan Falls be denied. And staff's here to answer your questions.
I will again go to Director Taylor. Direction on this one.
Yeah, again, in this case, I'm not completely in alignment with staff on this one, and I would like to refer it to my APC.
Okay, so you're asking for it to go to the APC. Is it moved and seconded? Thank you. Any discussion on this? I'm not seeing hands. Again, this is corporate vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to C3.
Chair, if I could just,
Sure, go ahead.
I'm going to recuse from this item as one of the affected properties is a former client of mine.
Okay, thank you, Director Bloomfield. Down to C3, which is a petition to enter the service area in electoral area E, CAO.
Thank you. The regional district has initiated a service area petition that seeks to include the entirety of the properties at 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, 4, 6, 5, 0 North Naramata Road, being strata lots 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, district lots 33, 14 in the Naramata Water System service area. And the recommended motion is that the Naramata Water System Local Service Establishment Bylaw 3086, 2024, being a bylaw to extend the Naramata Water System service area, be read a first, second, and third time. Staff's here to answer questions.
Okay. Director Federico, direction.
Move the staff recommendation, please.
All right, moved, seconded, thank you. Any discussion on this? Again, seeing no hands, corporate vote will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Again, motion carries. Down to C4, official community plan and zoning bylaw amendment in electoral area C, CAO.
Thank you. This application is seeking to amend the zoning of the subject property in order to allow for a two-lot subdivision to unhook a parcel divided into or divided by a highway. And the recommended motion is that electoral area C official community plan amendment bylaw 2452.24 and the Okanagan Valley zoning amendment bylaw 2800.41 2024 be denied. Staff's here to answer questions.
Okay, thank you. Go to Director Knodel. Direction on this one?
Yes, I'd like to make the alternate recommendation and I'll speak to it.
Okay, so you're moving the alternate, which is to approve it.
Yes, sir.
It's seconded. Go ahead, Director Knodel, if you'd like to speak to it.
This lot was already improved for a residence under our existing laws. So it doesn't cause any urban sprawl. And due to a family tragedy, it changed the dynamics of the family and made this somewhat unnecessary. Also, and the pictures don't do it justice, but frequent access across this road, both accesses being angled and on blind corners would create a hazard. And if you own both properties, you would be crossing more than normal. So there's an added to it. Once again, I say a family tragedy kind of set the family dynamics apart. So the property is, the development of the property is no longer viewed as necessary for the family, the extended family. So it would add to the area. It has no effect on the dynamics of the area. It's not ALR land. It would never be farmable. It's very steep and rugged. So I see no reason to deny this and open for discussion at this point.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on this? Go ahead, Director Taylor.
Question to staff, how many homes would be permitted on this second lot?
Go ahead, staff.
Yeah, so the small holdings on the new proposed lot would allow for one single detached dwelling, and since it's over 1 hectare, it would allow for an accessory dwelling as well.
Okay. Any further questions or discussion? Go ahead.
Just for clarity, so the alternative for this that is on the floor right now is not just simply to approve. It would be for 3 readings and going through the whole process of a public hearing. There is also a delegation to the director, so we'll have to split that vote when it comes to it.
Okay. This then would be, the public hearing would be held in Area C. Is that the proposal? Okay, just to be sure, for my own clarity. All right, this is then 2 sections to this. The first portion would be rural, on giving it first and second reading. I'll call the question on that. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries on that. And the second portion is to hold the public hearing in Area C and delegate it to Director Knodel. That's corporate. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to C5. This is the official community plan and zoning bylaw amendment in Area A. CAO.
Thank you. This application is seeking to amend the zoning of the subject property in order to facilitate a 6-lot bare land strata subdivision, and the recommended motion is that the Electoral Area A Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 2805.01 2023 and the Okanagan Valley Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2800.23 2023 be adopted. Staff's here to answer questions.
Okay, thank you. Director Bush is moving it for me. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Great. It's on the floor. Any discussion on this? I would just make the comment, as this is in my area, that this was one that we had just given an extension to because Highways was slow in responding, and was good we did. Worked out just right, so meets good rationale for keeping those extensions once in a while. And this one again is a rural vote. Seeing no other hands or comments, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to Public Works. Item D1, a recycle contract, CAO.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to receive funding from Recycle BC for the provision of curbside recycling and collection services, Village of Karameas, electoral areas A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and I, as well as Red Wing Resorts within the Penticton Indian Band lands, and funding for the collection of residential recycling materials at the Campbell Mountain, Oliver, and Karameas landfills. Recommended motion is that the board authorize the chair and the chief administrative officer to renew a contract with MMBC Recycling to collect residential recycling from homes and landfill depots from January 1st, 2025 to December 31st, 2029. Staff's here to answer your questions.
Okay, all right, it's moved. Is there a seconder for it? Thank you. It's on the floor. Any discussion on this? Director Monteith.
Thank you, through the chair. I guess on page, I don't know, anyways, there's a conversation here about glass bottles and jars. Are we offering that again to curbside pickup, or is that still not included?
Ms. Bloomfield?
The glass bottles are at the depots.
Still staying at the depots, but Recycle BC does collect them from there, correct? Okay. Any other questions or discussion on this? All right, this is a corporate vote. Call the question. All those in favor, thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to E, Community Services, Canada Summer Jobs Grant Application, CAO.
Thank you. The purpose of this is to support operations of the recreation, summer activities, GIS data, and application support for a focus on our Emergency Operations Center, as well as Information Services. We're asking for a right to apply for a subsidy for students, and the recommended motion is that the board approve a Canada Summer Jobs grant application for wage subsidy of up to 50% of the current provincial and territorial minimum hourly wage for 3 summer students in the Recreation, GIS, and IT department.
Okay, direction on this? Director Bush is moving it. It's seconded. Any discussion? Start with Director Monteith and then Federico.
I think we might have the same question.
Go ahead.
Is it the recreation section? Is that what you're questioning? Okay, so under the rules being requested, there's a request for recreation for Area I. Is that still on the table?
Andy?
Over to staff. Go ahead.
Sorry, would you repeat that question, Director Monteith, through the chair?
Thank you. So one of the roles being requested is for recreation coordinator support for electoral area I.
Let me do.
Go ahead, CAO.
So there's 3 electoral areas that are looking at pausing, I'll call it, or eliminating recreation. And they are in the current budget because that is consistent with prior years. However, there is going to be a motion coming into the board asking permission from the board to eliminate recreation in Naramata. There's 3, I believe, 3 days a week for Naramata, also for West Bench and for Caledon. So that's going to be taken out, and if these students are going to, if they are finally approved, they would be redistributed to recreation to the remaining service areas that include the recreation in the budget.
Okay. Director Federico.
Thank you through the chair. So then now I have 2 questions, because building on that, then if recreation is going to be reduced, but parks is always increased, they have tons of stuff that happens during the summer, could that not be redirected then to be more of a parks position, supposed to a recreation position? That's question 1. And then question 2 is, how successful have we been and how many positions have we had historically? It is great to see GIS and IT and IS in there as well. So 2 questions in there.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair, we do have to do the application by the 19th, so it has to be defined as a recreation student role. I think we would have the flexibility under the parameters, though, to have it work within the parks, as parks are part of recreation. We activate those spaces. So to that first question, I think that's manageable from that point of view. On the second question, sorry, and the second question again, apologies.
Go ahead.
Just how successful we've been in the past and sort of what departments have received assistance.
Thank you. Through the chair, we in I can only really talk to recreation. I know economic development had a role last year out of OK4s, and recreation, we did not get a role last year, but before that, we've had as many as 2 to 3 roles in different years. So we have been successful in the past.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion on this? Go ahead, CAO.
We have been successful for the solid waste services. And as far as IT goes, it's the first time ever that they're asking for students.
Applying. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Any other discussion? Seeing no hands, corporate vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to finance, Area E, Community Works, gas tax expenditure, CAO.
Oops, thank you. So this request is in regards to ongoing Spirit Park development project in Naramata Park and Recreation. This project has been funded through gas tax and the Growing Community Fund and other grants. The additional fund will primarily facilitate the completion of the washroom portion of the project. And the recommended motion is that bylaw 3098/2024, which authorizes the expenditure of $31,000 for electoral area E Community Works Gas Fund to complete the Spirit Park development washroom, be given first, second, and third reading and adopted.
Okay, Director Federico.
I'll move staff recommendation.
Moving it, seconded. It's on the floor. Any discussion? Seeing no hands, call the question on corporate. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to legislative services, elected officials, code of conduct, policy, and board remuneration bylaw, CAO.
Thank you. So purpose of this report is to ensure regional district policies are relevant and reflect current practices, to amend remuneration expenses and benefits bylaw 2903-2020 to allow reduction in remuneration for breaches of the electoral area code of conduct policy, and to change meal per diems to those recommended by the Canadian Revenue Agency. Recommended motion is that the amended electoral area code of conduct policy attached to the November 21st, 2024 administration report be adopted, and that board remuneration expenses and benefit bylaw amendment 2903.03 2024 be read a first, second, and third time and be adopted.
Okay, someone prepared to move that? Thank you. You want to speak to it?
Could we split? Could I just request? Could we
Oh,
split the two?
absolutely. Yes, we
Just like
can
to split them to two votes.
Okay, we will deal with them separately then. Any discussion on these? Someone prepared to move the first one? Moved, seconded, thank you. Last chance for discussion. Go ahead, Director Monteith.
Thank you. Through the chair, how does this amendments reflect to the UBCM version that they're creating?
I'll go to Ms. Malden, or?
So I haven't looked at the UBCM one for some time, Mark. Mark O'Coin may have, who's been spearheading this project. So turn it over to you.
Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you. It's still, the foundation is the same. The amendments are, it doesn't materially affect what came out of UBCM and LGMA.
Okay, is there any follow-up to that or any other questions? Online, Director Conans, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. I was just hoping that if any of the directors are going to be voting against this, that before we have the vote, they would explain why, just because it'll help me with, because again, there was a request to split, and I just wanted to know if there are some against this new version, if they could explain why they're possibly voting that way. That would be great. Thanks.
Okay, we'll see where it goes. Director Holmes.
Yeah, I asked to split because I'll be voting against the first one, but not the second one. And the reason I'll be voting against the first one is this for the exact same reason I spoke about last time when it first came to us in committee, I guess. And I just find that the enforcement part is still lawyer driven, and I think there's a better way to deal with issues than what's here.
Okay. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question on the first half of that then. All those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? Directors Holmes and Barkwell? Motion carries. The second half of that, someone prepared to move it? Moved, seconded, thank you. Any discussion on this? Seeing no hands, call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to security issuing bylaw for E911, CAO.
Thank you. So this is for borrowing funds for 911 emergency services loan authorization bylaw. It is in the 2024 budget. The administrative recommendation is that bylaw 3094-2024 being a security issuing bylaw for the purpose of borrowing funds for the upgrading to the 911 emergency services be read first, second, and third time and be adopted.
Okay, direction on this? Someone prepared to move it? Thank you. Seconded. It's on the floor. Any discussion? Quiet bunch this morning. Call the question on this being a corporate vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to G3, Headley Parks Maintenance Cost Contribution Service, CAO.
Thank you. This is in regards to remove a reference to a specific third party in the current bylaw and that bylaw 2960.01, 2024 being the bylaw to amend the Headley Parks Maintenance Cost Contribution Service Establishment Bylaw 2960, 2022 be removed, reference to a specific third party be adopted.
Okay, go to Director Roberts.
Thank you, and I'm in support of this specifically because there are different societies within the community, and to name it as specifically one, it could change, and it has changed over the years, so we wanted to create the flexibility that if one took over the park from the other, then we'd still have the bylaw in place.
Okay, just creating the flexibility there. You're moving it, I'm assuming. Seconded, it's on the floor. Any further discussion? Not seeing any hands. Again, corporate, all those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to CAO reports. Anything from the CAO?
Just one thing. Last Tuesday, we had a EOC practice, and I would just want to thank, it was a what I call true regional reference. There was Penticton was involved, Penticton staff, Summerland, Princeton. There was some other fire departments, and it was a true scenario. And I think we're going to be having more, and in the future, I see that the rest of the local governments will be there. Also, there was some First Nations that were represented. So I want to thank all of the different local governments that participated.
Okay, Director Taylor, you have a question?
Yeah, I would like to get to a point when we do these tabletop exercises that the board is involved as the policy group and starts exercising its role in that regard as well with the various staff.
CAO?
So we now have I'm told it's a purple because I'm colorblind, a vest for the policy group. And I am your representative currently for the policy group along with Christy, the deputy CAO. There will be some, I believe, some of the different practices that we're going to have where you need to see what's going on. It's a change in the way that we've been doing things in the past. As you know from previous EOCs, you're updated on a regular basis, and you're going to be updated even more efficiently. And not just you as the directors, but also for the local governments, also those councillors that are not part of the regional district, and the First Nations are included. And there's a wide range in the policy group, and there'll be some more information coming out in the next, between now and the next, knock on wood, EOC, that hopefully we don't have one.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions or anything for the CAO? Seeing none, nothing further, CAO, from you?
Nothing further.
Okay, that brings us down to other business, the chair's report. There was a Fire Safety Act committee meeting, the working group that I sit on. We met on Tuesday, and I think it's today at 10 o'clock. The CAOs are meeting on the Fire Safety Act, and I believe we have a representative for the CAO to sit on in that, as he's here instead of on that. And the other item I would just report on would be that we did have a meeting with highways folks in regards to the Highway 97 slide. I thought it was well attended for the most part, and I think the explanations and some of the descriptions they give of what's going on there give us a better understanding of the actual size of that project. So I can't get into the exact details on it, but it wouldn't hurt if you were interested to chat offline on it. But it's going to be ongoing, to say the least, on how long that darn slide's going to affect us. Brings us, someone had a question? No? Okay, director's motions. Any director's motions? Oh gosh, quick hands here. I'll go with Director Gilbert first and then over to Director Federico.
Thank you through the chair. So I have two notice of motions that I'm bringing forward that will come to the next board meeting, and then they have been sent to the Deputy CAO and Corporate Officer, Ms. Malden. So the first one is that the board dissolve the Community Services, Corporate Services, Environmental and Infrastructure, Planning and Development, and Protective Service Select Committees, and that the board establish an electoral area subcommittee with a term of reference decided on by the electoral area directors, and that the board direct staff to do draft amendments to bylaw number 2789-2021, Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen Board Procedure Bylaw, to include section 6.3 the following, that the agenda for a regular board meeting contains the following matters in the order which they are listed below. However, where appropriate for timing or for other reasons, the corporate officer may determine an alternative order, a variation to the agenda. So it would be called to order, public and statutory hearings at 9 a.m., introduction of late items, adoption of the agenda, recess to a committee of the whole, reconvene board meeting, adoption of board minutes, consent agenda, department reports, recess to a closed meeting, CAO report, chair's report, notice of motions, business arising, board members, verbal updates, items coming out of closed session, board representation and adjournment, and that the board direct staff to draft amendments to bylaw number 2903-2020, board remunerations, expense and benefits, to remove attendance at committee meetings same day as board meeting from Schedule A for director and alternative director remunerations, and that the board direct staff to draft amendments to bylaw number 2903-2020, board remunerations, expenses, benefits, to increase attendance at board meetings from $194.73 per meeting to $367.28 per meeting in Schedule A for director and alternative director remunerations. So that's the first very long notice of motion. And the second one is a joint motion between Director Graham and myself, which is that the board directs staff to take steps to establish an economic development advisory committee composed of the following members: up to 7 elected officials, 1 from each regional board member community, so Summerland, Penticton, Oliver, Soyuz, Karamias, Princeton, and 1 from the Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen Board, up to 4 members, 1 from each Indian band, so Penticton, Soyuz, Lower Similkameen, Upper Similkameen, and 1 from each economic development related partner organizations such as post-secondary institutions, entrepreneurial support agencies, Board of Trade, and Chambers of Commerce, and then members at large from a cross-section of key industry sectors such as agricultural, small business, manufacturing, technology, and healthcare. So I've sent those off, so they'll come to the next meeting.
Okay, that's a good thing those are a notice of motion, because I'm not going to be able to deal with that by memory, that's for sure. Any other notices of motion, Director Federico?
Yes, thank you through the chair. So we have the Chute Creek Stewardship Society that's been working on updating a creek out by Indian Rock, and so they're applying to the OBWB's upcoming grant. So they're just looking for support. So the language on there is that the regional district forward a letter to the OBWB in support of the Chute Creek Stewardship Society application to the Water Conservation and Quality Improvement Grant Program for the Chute Creek Restoration Project.
Okay, that's for just a notice of motion, or does that need to be dealt with today? Nope, notice of motion, so coming at the next one. Any other notices of motion? Okay, so those ones will come at the next meeting. Verbal updates. Oh, Director Gettens, you got a hand? Notice of motion or?
Yeah, no, not a notice, not a notice of motion. Thanks, Chair. I'm just curious though, if we could get a copy of what was forwarded to the CAO on the previous notice of motion, so we can have a minute to read it over, please.
We can probably get that sent out to everybody. Thank you for the suggestion. Anything further? Go ahead, Director Taylor.
Are we in the verbal update?
That's where we're starting now. So verbal updates. Do you want to be first to go? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just very happy to advise that our incorporation committee has more or less completed its task, and we'll be bringing forward a recommendation in favor of a referendum, and that'll work its way through the due process. So that's kind of the end of the road for that committee, and the end of, you know, one step in the process. And I'm really looking forward to working with the board on that. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to give me a call. Second, just point of information, we now have 2 restaurants in Okanagan Falls. We have a second evening restaurant. So you are watching the rebirth of our community.
Good news. Anything else, Director McCordoff?
Yes, thank you. So tomorrow and Saturday is the Christmas light up in Osoyoos. So we have a parade. We've been doing this for many, many years. I need to tell you, we always work with Oliver because they had theirs last week and we have ours this week. So we don't compete on the same day, but we have breakfast at Smitty's where you get a free breakfast if you bring an unwrapped toy or a cash donation. That starts off first. And then we have a great light up parade tomorrow night and breakfast with Santa for the kids on Saturday morning and a craft fair at the Legion. So it's a fun event. We'd welcome any of you to attend if you like. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Any other verbal updates, Director Federico?
Thank you through the chair. So on that note, tonight is the Naramata European Outdoor Market from 4 to 7, so right down Robinson, or tomorrow night, sorry. And it's always a great time with some awesome vendors. So add that into the list of things to do this weekend.
Okay. Lots of places to go. Any other verbal updates? Director Bush?
Yeah, so I don't know, it was last week or 2 weeks ago, we were asked to put in a password for, what is it, Microsoft Office or something like that, but we didn't get any explanation of why or where it's from, and I never like to give out passwords if I don't know what it's about. So I think if things like this happen again, that we should get an email explaining what it's about and why we need to do it and when and whatnot, because I didn't get any emails for 10 days, and I think, wow, this is nice.
Yeah, I had the same issue on my phone, no emails for a while, but good suggestion. Anything further as far as updates from the communities? Not seeing any other hands. That brings us down to a close. Go ahead, Director Roberts.
So I was leaving, just so that we're not left out, the Karameas and Karameas area is having their parade tomorrow as well.
Okay.
Winter parade.
Good to know. Down to the closed session. We're looking to go into closed, or do we just need to report out on this? Ms.
So there's
Mulder?
no requirement to go in camera. There are no in-camera items. However, you may want to bring that item out.
Okay. We need a motion then to bring this out of camera or into the open, or should I just report it? Okay, I got a little blurb here that at the October 3rd, 2024 board meeting, the board endorsed the signing of the Intergovernmental Memorandum of Agreement for the Collaborative Leadership Table. We're just bringing that out to the public, and that event was held, oh gosh, now I forget the date, but not too long ago. And that signing took place. So putting that out there and looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. We can go straight into, but I don't think they're here.
They're not here, but we could probably do the environment meeting in that
That's
period of time.
what we're just whispering about over here, but some of them may not be here, but we can shift the agenda around a little bit to make that work. So I'm going to turn it over to Director Taylor to deal with environment. And I would suggest moving item C up in front of the, or either or. If the staff are doing it, it's up to you. So go ahead, Director Taylor.
So I'll, first of all, I'll get my glasses on. Call the meeting to order, Environment and Infrastructure Committee meeting at 9:40. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda, please? CAO, can I ask if staff are present to address both of these issues?
We're just checking because in the reports, there's some consultants that are going to be involved. We're just seeing if they're here.
Okay, so we will pause. Okay, we're just waiting for a consultant to come online and then we'll get going with item B. Okay, I'll bring the committee meeting back to order again. Our first item is an update on the Skaha Estates Improvement District acquisition. I'll refer it to our CAO for an introduction.
So, thank you. This is to provide the results of the completed engineering assessment and direction to continue through the acquisition process as outlined in the utility acquisition policy. And the recommended motion is that the Skaha Estate Improvement District Water System Assessment Report completed by True Consulting be received by the committee. We have the consultant here with a presentation and staff to ask questions. Lisa?
Thank you, CAO. Yeah, we have Sean Curry online today. He's from True Engineering, who worked on the assessment report. So I think I'll just turn it right on over to Sean.
Thank you for having me. Just to confirm, can everybody hear me? Just to make sure. Good to go.
Yes, you're
and we
good.
can see my screen too.
Yes. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, I'm Sean Curry from True Consulting. I kind of specialize in water modeling and different utility modeling for True Consulting. Today, we're going to talk about the Skaha Estates Improvement District Water System Assessment. We're going to and feel free to chime in with questions throughout. I'm quite happy to answer as we go. Overall, this is kind of what we did. We'll get into the project background, a regulatory overview, and the assessment criteria utilized. The overall water system assessment for the existing system. Then we get into asset management planning for that existing system, infrastructure upgrades and improvements that have come through the assessment, and then a financial forecast of everything involved. Getting into the project background, True Consulting was retained by the RDOS. We had been working with SCID on a few things before, and we kind of came through. Then there are 3 sub-consultants utilized on the overall project. Laird Aquatics was retained directly by the SCID to do a water chemistry analysis on the source water. Then we retained MPE and riding engineering to do a controls and electrical assessment and a structural assessment on the asset buildings or asset structures. So from all this, we get into the system background. The project area, it's about 3 kilometers north of Okanagan Falls, just south of Penticton. Overall service area about 95 hectares. Was first constructed in the early 60s. Took about 5 years to do the initial overall area. And then SCID was then incorporated in 1977. After that, we got into some different upgrades in the 80s and then kind of late 2000s. Overall, 185 lots are serviced. Of those, 159 are active based on kind of a review of user billing and a review of orthographic imagery. So getting into the regulatory overview and assessment criteria, improvement districts are governed under the Local Governance Act. They have bylaws. So we reviewed those. Then from the RDOS's assessment criteria, we're looking at it as a potential acquisition. So we were looking at the subdivisions and servicing bylaw as our basis for the assessment. Also being an improvement district, they're governed by regulatory bodies such as the Ministry of Health and various environmental guidelines. So we will jump into kind of the existing system. What we're seeing here is the existing system composite. So source water intake is in Skaha Lake. It's about 7 meters below the surface, which is very shallow in comparison to kind of today's standards. There is a lower pump house that pumps the raw water or source water into the distribution system. It's hit with chlorine right at that point, goes through a very short chlorine contact main, which is insufficient for kind of today's standards as well, before going into the distribution system. Throughout the lower zone, which is delineated, or the zone delineation is shown as the dark black line here. So lower zone pumped into the lower reservoir. From the lower reservoir, it is pumped through the upper pump station all the way up to the upper reservoir. Another item to consider here is that there's no way for water to be conveyed from the upper reservoir down to the lower reservoir. So there is some stagnation issues up in the upper area. Then getting into the existing water treatment objectives. So Ministry of Health lays out the 43210 treatment objectives, where 4 refers to the 4-log removal of viruses. Typically, that's treated by chlorination. 3 refers to 3-log removal of various cysts. That's treated by filtration typically. 2 refers to 2 treatment processes for surface water sources. 1 refers to online monitoring of turbidity and how it can't go above 1 turbidity unit. And then 0 is in the source water, no detectable E. coli or coliforms. Each one, so we've kind of put in SEID context for this. None of these items are achieved currently, regularly. They come into play like every so often. They've got hits on different ones of the items here. And that's brought into the fact that there are conditions on permit on from Interior Health. So water treatment is a serious concern with this system. The next step, and almost the initial step after doing a background review, is to then look at population projections and a build out for the system. We've looked at a 20-year horizon in consultation with the regional district staff, kind of typical for this type of report. We've established the existing service population and then projected that forward based on different growth rates. And that's from taking into account the OCP for this area. And then we've split that up into, because these are really independent pressure zones currently, so we've looked at different growth rates in the different areas of the community. We've come up with kind of a 70% growth in the upper area and a 30% growth in the lower area. And that's based on build out of that area where a lot of upper zone has not been built out yet. Then the next step is to review historic water demand. We've looked at the past 5 years and kind of relate that to system capacity. As an engineer, we really look at maximum day demand as our key indicator for system growth and system performance. So we've related that to the system capacity. Not a big issue in this case, where the dark blue line here kind of shows historic water maximum day demand. In relation to supply capacity, not an issue currently. It becomes more of an issue on the daily withdrawal rates. So there are exceedances on the daily license limits in the system. Annual overall consumption, not a real issue for licensing limits, but the daily one is. Then taking those two together, we come up with projected water demands. We've projected those based on the different growth rates. And then we've also added in a metered rate, which takes into play water conservation efforts that could be undertaken. There is a key point here is the per capita demand in the system is very high in relation to, say, Okanagan Falls, Penticton, and other kind of Okanagan communities. So there is a lot of room for water conservation. So in this case, we've looked at implementing a universal water metering program over a 4 or 5 year period, getting water savings, and then projecting that forward at the 1.5% growth rate. So we've looked at the 1.5% growth rate as our kind of worst case scenario for the system of what would we potentially need to build for. And we have looked at it in relation to no water conservation efforts and water conservation efforts. So those are our design numbers moving forward and the basis for the overall report. So a quick summary of kind of the existing system capacity and performance. As previously noted, 43210 treatment objectives are not currently achieved. The maximum daily diversion is exceeded every so often. I'll get into this and again, but the available fire flow is currently not compliant. Also, the reservoir storage is not compliant to current standards. This comes into the next one comes into play more of as a later date, but some of the systems are not compliant for providing adequate backup. So the upper pump station, one of the pumps may not be able to produce adequate maximum day demand flow in the future. And then another key item also mentioned was there's no interconnection between the pressure zones to allow water to be conveyed from the upper zone back to the lower zone. This creates some significant existing issues for operations where there's known stagnation issues and reservoir turnover in the upper zone. And from that, we have the risk of kind of bacterial regrowth. So it is a bit of concern. Getting into the modeling efforts and this again is still an existing system, we look at it for pressure and then fire flow. So this one shows pressure. We put on bands for typical pressure requirements. So the pink shows low pressure. The purple shows higher pressure. And that's kind of in relation to the maximum and minimums provided in the regional district bylaws. You can see in the lower zone area, there's a few spots where houses are serviced above that minimum pressure zone requirement, which leads to pressure inadequacies, I'd call it, in housing. Smaller issue, but the bigger issue is a lot of these hydrants are located right at the extents of the pressure constrained areas, and they are impacted by what the system can deliver for adequate fire flow. For the upper zone, we don't have too many issues for low pressure. We do run into some issues for very high pressures, and you can see we're getting up to 200 PSI in the upper zone. So it is pretty high in relation to typical municipal systems. The next step here is to relate pressure into fire flow. And for this, we also items come to play of water main diameter, age, and kind of performance overall. The available fire flow here is low in relation to current standards. So a key item would be based on the era that this was originally constructed in the 1960s. The lower zone has a lot of small diameter pipe, which just cannot deliver fire flow in relation to today's municipal standards. So we typically look at kind of a lower limit of about 60 liters per second for fire flow available from a hydrant. It's just not able to be produced in this case. So there's a few instances in the upper zone where the newer main can provide that, but throughout it's typically a little bit lower than what should be desired. So knowing the pressure constraints and the fire flow constraints on the existing system, we've come up with a 4-phase phasing plan for upgrading of the distribution system for hydraulic purposes. 2 of these phases are kind of capital works projects. The phase 3 and 4 come in more into play with asset management. and renewal of some of these older mains, but just to kind of review it, phase one is more limited for kind of an increase to the fluorine contact system and getting that in line with Ministry Health standards, and then taking the opportunity to do an upgrade of an existing domestic system distribution line along the lower area. Some small improvements to fire flow are seen, but that really ties into the phase two project. So phase two distribution system upgrades, we're looking more at improving fire flow and pressure. And in this case, we take the opportunity to introduce pressure reducing stations to make an intermediate pressure zone. So tying to the upper zone through a pressure reducing station, introducing a new water main connection into an intermediate zone. General increases for fire flow in the intermediate zone, but then tying into the lower zone, which really increases the fire flow availability because it provides a second avenue of flow coming down. Then getting into phase three, we really get into more of an asset renewal and looking at replacing a lot of the smaller diameter pipe in the lower zone, which is undersized for today's standards. So in this case, we see significant upgrade or improvements in fire flow availability in the lower zone. Again, this should be seen as more of an asset renewal type of project where there are a lot of mains that would be upgraded. And then phase four looks at kind of what are the other areas that are currently deficient. In the upper zone, the key constraint is the direct connection right up to the reservoir. It's just undersized for delivering higher flows, so upgrading that. And I'd say phase 3 and 4 are more of a 20 to 50-year horizon for timing of them. Getting into asset management, so considering the overall system, we break all the existing components up and assign service lifespans based on published numbers, then assign cost estimates and basically replacing of all those items within at the end of their prescribed lifespan. It's better kind of seen on this next one, and you see this is the model for financing that, and it's scary. The main reason for that is a lot of these assets are at the end of their prescribed lifespan, so you see a massive investment right off the bat. This just isn't realistic. I'll be the first one to admit that. And especially in the case of a system like this where there are known issues for treatment, which would take priority over asset renewal most likely. So what we've done is considered this, but then looked at it as a risk-based model instead of just a call it dumb financial model. So we put in a bit more information on the risk of each pipe for criticality and probability of failure. We've looked at this from a flow perspective in each pipe based on water modeling results and assign different factors to adjust the importance of each pipe. And what you can see here is just, it's a same investment, but over a longer period of time. So what we're doing is deferring a lot of those so kind of deferring over a longer period of time, but the lower risk piping and focusing our efforts on the more major items. So from asset management of the existing system, we get into infrastructure upgrades and improvements coming from the regulatory review. We've come up with a 11 item capital project list for capital improvements, kind of described as different items to improve performance and bring the system into more alignment with current regulations. standards. So in this case, we start with kind of a water meter implementation program to lower the water demand in the system. We get into the lake intake. That's being reviewed by well, not our consultant, but the water chemistry consultant, which is currently still being completed, I should mention. We've gotten preliminary results from them, but no final report yet. So that comes to play of extending the lake intake, getting it to a lower elevation. Then we get into replacement of the chlorination system and some general upgrades to the lower pump house. Getting into the distribution main upgrades that were discussed earlier. So that's that P5 project, which is the phase 1 of the distribution system upgrades. Then we get into the upper reservoir structural and electrical upgrades. Then into phase 2 of the distribution system upgrades, reservoir and other structural rehabilitation projects, and potentially a water treatment plant. Again, that item hasn't been fully reviewed yet. The water source assessment from Laird Aquatic is necessary to finalize what that would look like, and a feasibility study would have to be conducted in order to fully understand that scope. So from each one of those items, we get into a financial forecast. We take what we've done for the risk-based approach for asset management, adjust it based on the capital works program. So a number of those items will extend lifespans of, for instance, the structures here. Important structures such as like the pump houses and reservoirs we would extend the lifespan much past their prescribed lifespan. And that reduces the asset management investment, but we then have to take capital works into account. These next few slides kind of talk to. So a water treatment plant would have an investment and then reinvestment after a certain number of years. And the financial models for the initial capital works are then included too, to get to a final service fee for the overall system based on the number of users. And this is just taken straight out of the different financial models, where we have $279 monthly all the way up to $877 monthly to pay for all of this. Again, this is taken right from the models. It would have to be reviewed by financial professionals and come up with a better method to incrementally increase as opposed to having these annual big jump, well, not annual, but every so often having a large jump in user fees, which just wouldn't be preferred probably. And another thing to consider here is that these models just do not take into account the potential of getting grant funding for a lot of these projects, which hopefully we would, to reduce some of these numbers. And that would be a key kind of consideration item taken from Sky State Improvement District members, why they would be considered for a takeover here. Happy to take questions. That's the end of the slideshow.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Curry. Staff, do you have anything to add to that before we get into questions? Okay, so floor is open. Questions? I'm going to start the ball rolling. Oh, okay. We've got one here from Summerland.
I can't really comment on $3 million water plant installations, but if you've got just under 200 houses or locations and 640,000 for water meter installation, that's $3,000 per water meter installation. Why is that so expensive?
We've looked at it as a rural type of system where external water meter pits would be preferred. Again, that could be lowered if we do more of an internal water meter installation.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Okay, I'll make a couple of comments, might spur some, and I'm not trying to drag this out, but I think we have enough time to talk about this, and we have another half hour allocated for the next item as well. So first, I think it's interesting that, you know, this sizable chunk of money, and this was a irrigation district with a pretty, I mean, hugely dedicated, they're almost cultish. Sorry, I guess I better watch my language here. You know, pretty strong management group of dedicated owners. Question on the fire flow. Is there a system, is there provision for grandfathering? Like, there's tons of communities that are trying to adapt from a 60 liter per second to 120 or 150. So can you speak to that, Ms. Bloomfield?
Yeah, did you want to answer that, Sean? Or?
Yeah, I can touch on it. Again, there's no, this is in line with the bylaws. That's the way we've looked at it and getting it in line with regional district bylaws. It becomes a risk-based approach where there is, careful how I state this, I guess, but it is I guess a risk-based approach. There's no absolute requirement to get in line with improving those fire flows. It would impact insurance rates, I believe, through the insurance adjusters. And but yes, there is no absolute requirement to get it into that higher range. It is fully understood that these systems were constructed when the regulations were different, or the standards, I should say, were different. If we were building it in today's standards, we would build the system completely differently. Lisa, can you add to that? I guess.
Yeah, I'll just add to that a bit. A lot of the fire departments realize this, that they can't necessarily put their trucks on at 60 liters a second. So they take that into account. Some of them even have tankers that they bring with them. So yeah, they know that these hydrants don't produce 60 liters a second typically. So some of them do.
And we have one in Heritage Hills that does 3.
Exactly.
Director Coyne.
I guess the question would be to someone on staff. So knowing that we have a bylaw that says you have to have certain regulation, we're taking over the system, and then say we decide not to bring it up to the regulation that we've set, what is the liability on us for not meeting our own requirements at that point? Say somebody's house burns down.
Okay, that question might be to the CAO.
My experience is that local governments are always first to be sued, and we would be sued if we're not following our own policy.
Ms. Bloomfield, anything further? No? Okay. Any other questions? I've got one more myself. To Mr. Curry, you know, you've suggested that metering would bring down usage, and I'm sure it would, but it's older, larger homes with pretty massive green space. And it's different in that regard from, for instance, OK Falls, which you compared it to. And I'm just wondering, and then at the same token, you're talking about increasing the number of users. So what's the balance there? Are you really going to get the reduction in per house usage, and then as well you're going to add houses? So that's the first half of it. Is that realistic? And secondly, how difficult is it to increase the license for whatever it is, daily usage for the system?
Okay, so first off, the question of water conservation, it really does come into play of how a fee structure is put together. So a lot of the communities are doing a tiered fee structure. They look at it, you don't want to look at it in relation to a smaller community, or sorry, a smaller block community, let's call it. It would have to be looked at based on the existing water system usage. And you typically have different tiers of usage there where you get up to one point, and then there's a few users who are much higher than that with the very green lawns and exactly that massive green lawns that are using a lot of water. And typically you see, I want to say, I throw out 10% of users in that range, and a fee structure would best be targeting those high water users to give them incentive to lower their usage. And that it really is it's incentive so that they're not paying so much more than everybody else. But it really comes into play of how a fee structure is put together based on metered water usage. Second, sorry, can you repeat your second point? Your second question?
What's involved in increasing the volume or size of the water license?
Yes, sorry about that. It would have to go through the Ministry of Forests. They review water usage and taking it out. In this case, it can potentially get a bit challenging, though Okanagan region is known to be oversubscribed. So that absolutely could become an issue for increasing water licensing, but it's a process through the Ministry of Forests. They would want to see water demand initiatives taken into account, even if increasing the water license amount would be considered.
Last quick question, I think, to staff. How many actual users are there? 199, then 185 service lots, and only 159 that were active. And I'm wondering, how many actual billable lots are there at present?
The exact number, do you have that handy, Sean? The exact number?
The 159 number is what we've come up with based on reviewing existing billing.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else got any questions? I've dominated this. I'm done. Sabrina. Sorry, Director Monteith.
Thank you. Through the chair. Is there an opportunity to look at economy of scale with Caledon, knowing that Caledon needs to do a UV water treatment plant?
Ms. Bloomfield.
There's always a possibility of looking at joint facilities, but that's something that we haven't looked into yet. We don't have funding to look at that, but that's definitely something that has crossed our minds, yes.
And I guess I'll add, we did look into just very generally connection to an adjacent water system. So it's in the report, but it is very general.
Thank you. Yep, just to follow up, what would the directors need to do to have staff look at that as a viable option?
To staff?
Provide funding for a feasibility study for it.
I'm kind of thinking that's a little beyond the scope of discussion right now. I think we're looking at accepting the report and hopefully giving staff direction to move further. We're not even going to be considering that unless we get further down the road, I'm thinking. CAO?
I agree. We're just talking about alternatives because that's just one alternative.
I think there is interest in looking at alternatives. Go ahead, Ms. Bloomfield.
And yes, right now the regional district doesn't own either of the Lakeshore Waterworks or the SCID system. So we want to kind of get down the road a little bit further first, I think.
There's several alternatives that are worth looking at. We just need to get further down the road. So, okay, can I, if there's no further questions, Directors Knodel and Gettens. Director Knodel?
Hi, thank you. Through the chair, I just want to know when the original water license was granted, the volume amount, what was the number of serviced lots, or has that changed is what I'm getting at? Thank you.
To staff, Ms. Bloomfield?
I can answer
Mr.
that.
Curry?
Yeah. Yes, the water license has changed. The initial, so there's been 4 different amendments to the water license over the years. I can't exactly remember when the last amendment was done. I think it was the early 2000s when the upper pressure zone was implemented. And I don't have the answer for exactly what the number of lots were when it was first constructed, but that was back in the 1960s.
Follow up if I may. So as the numbers grow, the water license has, they've started to exceed the water license. So the natural scheme of things is to increase the water license. So we're not up to the standard for the houses that are in use right now. Is that correct? Thank you, sir.
I would say correct. Yeah.
Director Gettens.
Thank you to the chair. Great report. Thanks for all the information. I do have a question about the next step. So I understand we'll be asked to accept this report as a board, and then we go further down the acquisition policy with this system as well. And just given the delay that we've seen in the Sage Mesa water system, we've got other complicated systems also in Area D to the CAO. I just want to know how, if this goes further down and the irrigation district has their meeting in the beginning of this year, and then so now staff are charged with helping the conversion process. How are we looking for staff capacity for taking on another system? And are we also increasing competition within our own regional district for grants? Because we heard from Mr. Curry today how important grants are, and you could talk to me or Director Taylor about his other systems, how important grants are. So are we taking on a little bit more than we can handle here? Just like I said, I mean, Sage Mesa, we had to renew our acquisition, our agreement with the owners of the system, because we're quite behind on that one. So that's my question to the CAO, please.
To the CAO. So there is a limited capacity of how much staff can do. Next week, you as a board are going to finalize your strategic priorities. Staff has already finalized our own strategic priorities, which we will bring both yours and the staff's one to you. However, if this is going to happen and be part of the strategic priorities, it's going to reduce the staff's goals, which is ultimately mostly tied to your strategic priorities. So will that affect it? Yes. The only other way of doing it is give us money for consultants. And there's still going to be staff time involved. One of the things that when strategic priorities is finalized and adopted by you as a board, that is full capacity. And as things get added on, you as a board will have to authorize the things that are added on and then take something off. The way that we're doing it now is, let's say 20% of our year is EOC. We will come back and ask you to deduct 20% of not your strategic priorities, but the staff's. So there will be a consequence, and it all depends on what the board wishes us to do. You have total control of the goals.
Thank you. And can I just ask a follow-up with that?
Yes.
Great, thanks. I think I appreciate that approach for sure. And I'm just following up when you had said to Director Coyne about if we don't follow our own policy, then we're probably the first to be sued on that. And when we accept reports like this that highlight risks, like hydrants, and I mean that's every water system, and something that's happened along, are we at any risk of accepting a report and then delaying our part of the acquisition policy due to staff capacity? Because I don't think there's any funding available to pay for more staff capacity to take on another system. So are we at risk here at all?
So what history has told me that you have when we take over something like this, we have time to do it. You can't be expected to do the upgrades and put everything to standard immediately. So the courts would give us ample time to do it. However, it would have to be done. The other thing too is as we take on each new water services, we're going to be asking for staff. So right now, this will be a third one that would be in process if the board decides to go through it. However, we don't have the capacity right now to operate it. So that's something that the users would have to pay, not the ones that aren't part of it. The municipalities wouldn't have anything to do with it. In fact, it actually will help because administration costs will be spread out a little bit more than we have now. So it would be something that we'd have to implement. That's why we're paid for those studies, is to find out what needs to be done, but we don't have to do it overnight.
Thank you, CAO. I've got
Clarify, sorry,
several.
that's the wrong, that was, thank you, I appreciate that answer, but my question is this process that the acquisition, like we don't have a service set up. So we can't hire more staff to build with the capacity of the acquisition, so like what Sage Mesa's under as well. So until we have a service system set up, we can't hire any more staff to support this. That's my question right now, is just getting to that point. How are we doing that?
To the CAO.
We're juggling right now. If you're going to receive a report from staff on how much the exempt staff has got for personal donated time, that's where it's getting done right now. But as we're fine tuning the strategic priority tracker, which was called the Gantt chart, we need to go back to the board and do a better job in saying, okay, you've added this to us. We now are going to not do this, this, and this. You all also have the authority to say, no, keep this project, I want something else. You are competing against each other because one electoral area may have a project that may take a large amount of time from staff, but not have something in the strategic priorities that can be compensated to reduce it. So you would have to decide what can be taken off that is equal to the amount of time for the new project.
Okay, I am going to move on to some of the other questions now. I've got Director Conans and I believe Director Bloomfield.
Yes, thanks. And thanks for the presentation. And I have a little similar to Director Geddins and a holistic question about how we're approaching this. This is in the last 10 years, this has changed so much that it's become our focus, our primary focus, and also costs coming at us, amazing amount of costs and that are a detriment to our citizens, but needs to be done. What I'm wondering is if we need to actually look at our bylaw and change what we're doing completely with this department. Maybe it needs, I have no idea. I'm going to say that maybe it needs to be a separate department. Maybe it needs to be its own entity. Maybe we need to change our bylaw so that we are able to actually, we keep on talking about capacity. It is what it is. And remember that juggling affects everything that we're doing. Juggling affects everything that the RDOS is doing. So what I guess my question is with Sean, Mr. Curry, is are there communities, regional districts, obviously they're going through the same thing we are, and it's not going to stop. It's only going to get more. Is there a possibility of doing, this is beyond your scope, I'm sure, but of actually looking at how we're approaching this on a one-by-one basis and maybe changing the way our organizations approaches this completely? Like, do you do that type of work where you might help us in the future to actually approach this differently, because it's not doable anymore? And I'm just throwing that at you, or do you know or do you have any ideas in that fashion?
To the CEO.
First, to start off as a new department or division, that wouldn't be practical because you don't know when each water system is going to come in and be part of us. Right now, you'd want the department that is in charge of utilities to be part of this. They have the most knowledge. we do rely heavily on consultants, and that's where what I would suggest, and I think we do a pretty good job, is we keep track of what the costs are, and ultimately the cost for the consultant gets charged back to the utility that we did the work on. So we don't get it back right away, just so you know, it could be 2 years or 3 years. We set it up as an accounts receivable, and that utility owes the money to the taxpayers, the regional district. It's a lot of work. I believe the policy, we actually won an award for our policy at UBCM, so that we know it works. It's just a matter of, there's a lot of private utilities that want to join us because they're in a position where they just can't handle all the new requirements anymore.
Director Bloomfield.
Yeah, I think my questions have pretty much been answered, but just to echo my support in dealing with this in our strategic planning and priorities, and I think that we need to have some consistency in how we take over these systems and how we inform the users of those systems as to what the expectations might be of the regional district, and time frames as to when those systems might have to be or should be compliant with regulations. And I think that and how we can protect ourselves in that gap between when we take it over and when it is compliant. And I think they're all big discussions, not for right now, not for this item, but certainly something for strategic planning. And yes, it's a big item in other regional districts. When I talk to directors and mayors and chairs from other areas, and you hear some of the quotes that have come in for water treatment plants in different parts of the province, the numbers are eye-watering. Absolutely.
Okay, I think we're going to call the question very shortly here. Quick question to Ms. Bloomfield. The areas under boil water order, boil water notification, and roughly how long has that been?
Yeah, it's a boil water notice. And it's been in place, I believe, for a couple of years now. Do you know exactly, Sean, the dates?
I'll just look that up. It is about a couple of years. I'd have to. 1 minute there.
Okay, that's good enough. So I think is there someone there that would make a recommendation to accept the report? The staff recommendation is that the Skaha Estates Improvement District Water System Assessment Report completed by True Consulting be received by this committee. Moved. Seconded. Any further discussion? No? All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none. Okay. Any further comments, recommendations? I know this sort of is just a receipt. Do we leave this now until strategic planning, or can staff actually sit down and talk and inform the board as to where we're at right now? And so that's my question, I guess, of the CAO.
If the board accepts this and we proceed, it will be part of the staff's strategic priorities, and it'll be included with the proposed workload. But right now, we've added something new to the strategic priorities / CAT tracker, is how much work and hours are required from each department. So when you're talking about getting a new water system, it's not just the utilities department. There's other legislative services, communications, and even finance. So each project now has a estimated work hours, and then it says if we're over capacity or not. So it would just mean that some of the priorities that the staff thought may be required, maybe put from 2025 to 2026. And we're going to be letting the board know what that means. So if there's some projects that the staff thought we should do in 25, but because of capacity, we have to move it, you'll also know that. And we're waiting for the board to finalize yours, and after that, you'll see this report. If that answers your question.
I'll leave it there, sure. Okay, our next item, solid waste management plan update. I'll refer to the CAO for an introduction of that item.
So we've got the RCMP here and we only have 10 minutes for this article. Do you want to postpone this until after the RCMP?
Do I want to?
Would you like to? May I request that you?
I think that's a suggestion.
May I request that you postpone it?
Yeah. So what are we doing with this meeting, Ms. Malden?
So we could recess the meeting right now at 10:35. Everybody could grab a coffee or stretch their legs, and the RCMP all should be here within the next 5 or so minutes.
Okay, we'll do that, recess, and we'll be back at 10:45 for a different committee.
We'll get started here with the next committee meeting, which is the Protective Services, and I'll go to Director Roberts to chair this one. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Protective Services Committee, we've got ourselves starting as of 10:45. Can I have a motion in regards to the acceptance of the agenda? Thank you. And second, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Next up will be the delegation from the RCMP, and I believe I can turn it over to Staff Sergeant Dan Pollock.
I just said I was not going to forget the mic. Through the chair, thank you for having us. Yes, Dan Pollock representing the RCMP today, and Superintendent McCandy, who could not make it today. So I'll do my best to fill her shoes. I don't know if we have a PowerPoint available that she sent. If not, I can go with it, or I have it on USB.
Not seeing any. Is that anybody over there at CAO? Okay, they do have it. There you go.
No worries. I have it printed. If I need to fire away, I can do that, but I can give it a second.
Should come up any moment. Oh. There we go.
Okay. Thank you for having us. It's been an amazing year, amazing first year for myself and Superintendent McCandy at Penticton, South Okanagan, Similkameen Regional Attachment. We've been busy connecting with the community and engaging with partners, modernizing our police approaches where possible, and working with our detachment senior leadership team to enhance efforts in addressing public safety and connecting for a safer city. This briefing reviews the data from Q3, which is July 1 to September 30, 2024, the crime statistics, and provide a summary of our work under Q3 and the 2024 to 2027 Penticton RCMP strategic plan, as well as the 24 to 25 annual performance plans for each of the regional detachments. Next slide. During this quarter, our community policing team participated in multiple restorative justice meetings in Karamias, Summerland, and Oliver. Community policing presented in Osoyoos on fraud prevention, speed watch training with volunteers, and also met with the SOS Brain Injury Society in relation to a positive ticketing campaign that happened this summer. We continue to experience the benefits of our integrated crisis response team, an invaluable partnership with Interior Health and the RCMP. It's important for me to share that the work is not only be done by this team, but by the rest of the detachment, as everyone works to support and engage and connect those experiencing mental health crisis with the right supports. The team of 2 officers and 3 nurses work 7 days a week from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. and remain heavily tasked and support, when able, officers responding to calls for service where there is a reported mental health component. Often during the initial call to RCMP, it's not known that the subject is experiencing mental health addiction issues, and the ICRT team, which is the crisis team, may be called to assist and assess after the fact. Our nursing team has provided valuable mentorship to frontline teams and enhanced their skills in relation to supporting those in the community opening our team's eyes to community partners and options when engaging those with mental health and addictions issues requiring supports during the day-to-day interactions. All officers are required to regularly recertify and de-escalation training, applying officer experience, mentorship, and training from all of our teams. We're working hard to provide the best response to those experiencing mental health and addictions. Although we've been seeing a decline in the stats for our crisis response team in the last few months, we believe it's partly due to the collaborative approach of police and interior health, resulting in a reduction in calls to the same repeat clients. As well, interior health has some boots on the ground type initiatives, such as the assertive community response team with interior health. From January 1st, 2024 until October 8th, when this was ran, the ICRT team took, led, or supported 513 calls for service in the Penticton area. Next slide. We have a repeat offender management team, or ROMP team. Our crime reduction unit remains heavily engaged in the detachment's ROM, or ROMP offenders. Working with frontline teams, this team identifies the most active repeat offenders within the city, within the Penticton RDOS jurisdiction areas. They are proactively prioritizing enforcement actions against these offenders. There's been success in identifying and obtaining charge approval for, as an example of one ROMP offender, for some break-and-enters that we saw impacting our statistics during Q3. The crime reduction unit made multiple arrests on other ROMP offenders this quarter for possession of stolen property related to auto theft, possession of firearms, drug trafficking, and court release conditions. There was one such incident in October where frontline members, with the support of the crime reduction unit, located a known property crime offender with a stolen vehicle in the Naramata area, where they recovered thousands of dollars worth of stolen property and returned much of it to its rightful owners. That matter is still under investigation and with the Crown. The regional detachments, so all of the other Summerland, Oliver, Osoyoos, Karamias, and Princeton, have been working with the crime analysts to reanimate the regional CompStat, or comparative statistical analysis program. This initiative commenced actually this last month and will continue to unfold on a monthly basis, where the crime analyst assists in intelligence-led prioritization of our activities, as well as targeting repeat offenders through the regional detachment area. So it provides some intelligence for our regional detachments as well to focus on these regional offenders. Frontline teams across the region are using this to provide a consistent approach to deal with repeat offenders, and for us to better tell the story to Crown Council when we are making arrests on some of these folks. Next slide, please. Members of the Penticton Regional Detachment participated in Cops for Kids tour in September. Each rider was required to raise $2,500 each to participate. There were 30 law enforcement officers that pedaled across Southeast BC to raise funds and awareness for local children in medical, physical, and traumatic crisis. We're very proud of Sergeant Lori Rock, Constable Liz Van Ivry, and Constable Gary Sandy, who participated. A considerable amount of our officers' time throughout the year is spent addressing mandatory recertification and training requirements, including pistol and carbine, annual requalifications, taser requalifications, CBRN, which is kind of like a gas mask training, and other various online courses. And we also have to make time every 3 years for operational skills, which is our all of our use of force training. On an HR front, general updates, we've seen a new recruit, or a new member, as we call them, to Oliver. We have another one in Karamias. We've just identified 2 transfers in for Osoyoos. There's a new member for Princeton, and there'll be a new corporal. Not that I'm looking at anybody identified for Karamias. We're continuing to focus on continuing to mentor our officers, foster leadership opportunities at all levels, while guiding our officers to ensure in-depth investigations are completed, complaints are notified in a timely manner, and follow work remains compliant with policy and captures adequate information. Our primary goal is to provide the best work product for Crown Council, best capture our police response to the goal of maintaining the public's confidence and the RCMP. We continue to see our benefit of the partnership with BC Highway Patrol, South Okanagan team. Next time, we're seeking to invite Sergeant Brian Evans of the BC Highway Patrol, who can speak on behalf of Highway Patrol and some of the initiatives that they're doing. One such initiative is December 7th is the start date for the Light Up BC Safety Campaign. With Christmas party season, we're just hoping to get more road checks out there and reduce some of the impaired driving. And I'm happy to report that BC Highway Patrol actually has, in Q3, 5,606 contacts with motorists in the Penticton, South Okanagan area. So they're a significant help to us on the road safety stuff. If there's any questions about that, I'm also going to go through the statistics really briefly for Cleveland, Naramata, Okanagan Falls.
Just give it a quick second. Does anybody have any specific questions as per the information that was brought to us from Staff Sergeant Pollock so far? All right. Not seeing any, you'll be able to carry on with your report. Thank you.
Move on. Okay. Penticton rural statistics Q3. As we said before, we're not going to kind of go over deep into the weeds, all the statistics. I kind of already talked about some of the initiatives. The numbers aren't super high. There was an overall year-to-date change of minus 5% in general for calls for service. There was that, well, that was the Naramata, the one major issue there. Other than that, nothing major popping out. There was a spike in bike theft. Most of that was from one location. So a little information to that particular campground where a lot of bikes were stolen, I think will help resolve that issue and lock some bikes up. Frauds remain a typical issue with online, a lot of online component, and I think people are generally getting more comfortable reporting them, even if they're not necessarily followed through upon, but people are feeling less stigma about reporting online frauds. So. Any questions about Penticton Rural as the stats look? I'll move on to
Not
Kaleden.
seeing any.
Okay. I'll move on to Kaleden. Lots of green. No major things in Kaleden. I don't know if anybody has any comments on Kaleden. Yeah, Kaleden is the utopia. It looks like there. Not a lot of major problems. Moving on to Naramata. We did have some, as I mentioned, there was that property offender that was arrested in Naramata that would have caused a spike in the auto theft, which is, I predict, should not continue to be there for the next quarter based on that arrest. There was some uttering threats issues. Most of those were in the summer. Hard to say what it's related to, but there were not people known to each other. I think it was probably a tourist-driven thing, or maybe some hotheads, but there were not people generally known to 60% were not known to each other. So with this tourist season, it's speculative that it was tourist related. Any questions on Naramata?
Everybody seems to be feeling fairly well informed.
Yes. Moving on to Okanagan Falls. Again, not major numbers. There was some auto theft. Auto theft rose from 23 to 24 for the same period. Again, we've had a few, I'm sure you're going to hear this story from the other members here, but we've had a few people roll in and roll out of our area from property crime, and Okanagan Falls. It's between Oliver and Penticton, and it got hit a couple times. We have made a couple of recent arrests, and again, it's one of these things I don't think is going to be there for next quarter. There are people that we addressed. Why these people roll in, it's any myriad of things, whether they have personal connections or it's just by random chance. But every once in a while, unfortunately, we have to deal with a regional offender that rolls through, and we do our best with them.
I have a question from Director Taylor.
Yeah, got a emerging drug house issue that the community's concerned about. So the message back to them is keep reporting each incident that they get. Is that it?
Yeah, I'm not, sorry, through the chair, I'm not familiar with a particular drug house and if it's a trafficking house or if it's a user. But yeah, keep reporting incidents. I can find out what house that is and probably get back to you on that individual house. But keep reporting incidents. It keeps our sights on it, and we'll do our best to see what the best thing to do with that house is, whether it's just someone that's there and needs some support or if it's a trafficking issue.
Any other questions? Not seeing any, we'll let you move on with your report.
I believe that's all I have for the Penticton Rural. I can do Princeton right away if that doesn't, I can leave it for Summerland and come back. I don't want to get out of order, but Sergeant Potter is not here today, so I'm going to do Princeton as well, but I'll turn it over to Corporal Hall for Summerland.
Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for having us. Summerland continues to enjoy a reduction in violent crime being reported. Stats are, along with last quarter as well, dramatically reduced in the majority of areas. We also enjoyed a decent quarter with respect to the majority of property crime, seeing a reduction or status quo. What we did see an increase was in auto theft, and our bicycle theft went from 2 to 3. So we saw a 50% increase. So what is concerning though, and I spoke to this with Mayor and Council previously last month, was you'll see the dramatic jump in frauds. And again, as Staff Sergeant Pollock has mentioned, they do have a very large portion of it being an online component to it. And a lot of our victims, I believe over 60% of our victims are seniors and or people in vulnerable positions. And so it becomes very difficult. And as I spoke to before, the majority of these tend to be overseas based and very hard to investigate, let alone prosecute. So we're taking more of an approach in the next quarter as well to facilitate more education with our vulnerable population to prevent these from happening. And then again, auto theft, we saw a rise from 8 autos stolen in Q2 to 11 being stolen over the summer. A couple of those I know that we can contribute or attribute to keys being left in vehicles, and summertime as well, people from out of town camping, whatnot, leaving their keys in their car and that kind of stuff. So overall, pretty much the same stats that we saw in Q2. Any questions? Oh, Councillor Barkwell, I recall that you asked me a question last in council. Thought of the afterwards. You asked about a mischief to property and whatnot, and how that was on the because we had a drop and whatnot. There were some vehicles that had been broken into in the previous quarter, but nothing was stolen. So they were scored as mischiefs because there was property damage to the vehicle rather than anything being stolen from it. So if someone breaks a window of a vehicle but doesn't take anything, we score it as a mischief rather than an attempt theft of or from auto. So I hope that kind of fills that in. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that report. It's really good. You know, I guess we're getting to that time of year where, you know, not only it's the Christmas, the Visa, the other kinds of frauds, and, you know, I shouldn't be sending any money to that Algerian princess, I guess. So we'll move it back to Staff Sergeant Pollock.
Back to me, I guess, to introduce Corporal Chad Jackson. Sergeant Wigglesworth is on an extended weekend this weekend, so he's not here, but Corporal Jackson for Oliver.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So I'll have the same message that Corporal Hall had for Summerland. Most of our stats are down, which is good. We had a busy winter last year. We had quite a few property crime people and for lack of a better word, prolific people who were causing problems last winter in Oliver. It quieted down through the summer. Theft of vehicles and theft from vehicles is one of our bigger areas we were hit with through the tail end of the summer and continued to be hit with through the fall. A lot of the people that were doing that were impacting the other regional detachments, Summerland and Carameus and Princeton as well. Some of those people have been arrested recently, so the stats will likely stay high through the beginning part of Q4, and hopefully that starts to slow down at this point. We've had a few of our problem houses within our detachment area have shut down or moved at the end of summer, which has slowed some of the stuff down for us. As Staff Sergeant Pollock mentioned, some of the people that cause our problems pop up and can create issues for us, and we try and slow that down as fast as we can. From a resourcing issue, we had the new recruit start in October. We're doing pretty good for resourcing wise, and yeah, there's always keeping our members trained and giving them time off through the summer, which took our priority as well. So does anybody have any questions?
Well, looks like everybody is happy with that report. Thank you very much. I'll pass that back to you.
Thank you. As more on the HR update for Oliver, Sergeant Wigglesworth has only got a few months left, and he's going to be retiring. So we're actively working on replacing Sergeant Wigglesworth as well. So you might grace his presence one more time, and that'll be about it. On to, I believe, is a Soyuz next. Sergeant Beta for a Soyuz.
Thank you to the board and chair. We always say we're not going to go through all the stats, or we've tried to start changing things up lately. So I'm not going to go through everything. What I do want to point out, though, is whether you see red or green on the rural or municipal side of it, we are just fluctuating just up or down just a few, whether it's, so percentages are, even if you see, like Corporal said, when you see a 50% or 100% percentage, it's really just a couple different files. But I'll touch on to your question earlier about whether you should report drug houses. It's important, maybe we haven't mentioned before, but we base our policing, our targeted enforcement on the information that we receive. So although you have the stats in front of you of what types of files we're dealing with, it doesn't actually specify to you what houses or what people these are tied to. We have that information, and so we target our enforcement towards those houses that may be drug houses, or to those people that may be involved in property crime. So it is important to let us know anytime that you think there may be a drug house or something, so we can, and it's not just us, but we ensure that when we bring members in overtime, they know the areas that we need targeted. And so it's a continuance regardless of who we have. Stolen vehicles has been a thing for every detachment, not only in the South Okanagan, but throughout the Okanagan, and if you read the media, throughout Canada. It's vehicles are being stolen a lot more now than they have been in the past. For us, and I mentioned before, F-350s are the number one targeted vehicle, just because they don't have the same immobilizer, and they're a big truck, and they're able to use that vehicle for other crimes. So the messaging I'd like to get out there is to anyone that owns an F-350 or a larger truck that doesn't have an immobilizer, think about getting one added on, or some type of anti-theft device. The other message, now that we're getting into the winter season, we're seeing a lot of people warming their vehicles up. They'll go out, their vehicle's parked outside, they'll start their vehicle to defrost it, and they'll go inside while waiting for their vehicle to warm up. Please don't do that. It's just an opportunity and an easy target for a vehicle to be taken. As well, we're getting to the Christmas season when people are out there shopping. We understand that when people are traveling to another city, they can't obviously take everything out of their vehicle and take back home right away when they're going from store to store. So do what you can to hide those valuables, so you're not an easy target of theft. And then, yeah, just on a resource, we mentioned that we have 2 members identified for Soyuz coming in. We'll have one here mid to late December, and the other one, although they are identified, we still need their replacement from where they're coming from. And any questions? I'm open for anything.
Oh, not seeing any questions, but thank you very much.
Through the chair, next up is Karamias, Corporal Parsons for Karamias.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, and through the chair, we'll go through quickly the third quarter for Karamias. Like Sergeant Beta said, I'm not going to go through each stat individually, but I'm going to talk more about what we've done for community engagement in Karamias throughout this quarter. So part of our APP, our annual performance plan, was to increase the amount of restorative justice forms that we completed. And through this quarter, we completed 3 RJs with different people. We also did a robbery prevention presentation for one of our local businesses who had requested it, just to educate their employees on what they should do or shouldn't do in the event of a robbery. Just yesterday, I know it's not in the quarter, but just yesterday we did a Crown the Cruiser event where a Karamias detachment last year was successful in a bid through civil forfeiture to get a grant to buy a trailer for the entire regional detachment to use for different types of things. And the community of Karamias is so generous that we use it for a Crown the Cruiser event, and we filled it up 3/4 and also raised $2,000 for the community, for the food bank, local food bank. Our stats did show an increase in fraud, and as most of you know, that's mostly an online or telephone type scam involving seniors. So we just completed a fraud presentation at the senior center where we had approximately 20 people attend. And again, it's we get a lot of repeat people coming, but we also get new people at every presentation. So that's something that we're going to continue doing. During Q3, we staffed our First Nations policing position. It's Constable Scheidel. She took over for Corporal McDermott, who's now in Princeton. So we've re-engaged with our schools. We have somebody out at the Lower Similkameen Indian Band almost on a daily basis. So we're engaging the community on a lot of different levels there. We also have our new recruit, Constable McFadden, who's currently being trained in Penticton. Penticton just offers more exposure for the new recruits coming out of depot, and he'll be well equipped when he comes to Karamias. So with that, I'm open for any questions.
Thank you, Corporal Parsons. Any questions for? Not seeing any. Well, thanks again, and really appreciate all those initiatives that you've done in our area. And I've heard nothing but positive around your initiative with fraud, online fraud, and it does get out and around to the community. So back to Staff Sergeant Pollock.
Thank you, through the chair. Speaking for Princeton today, Sergeant Potter is on our actual every 3 years. You have to do all your use of force training, and that's what he's doing this week. So the detachment priorities for Princeton are crime reduction, traffic and road safety, and employee wellness. On a crime reduction front, this last quarter, they made an arrest on somebody who was in from out of town, responsible for both kind of violence and some property crime offenses. After much ado trying to find this person, they tracked them down and got them into custody on some warrants. They did some breaches, so condition compliance on some known offenders. They had a restorative justice referral for domestic assault. They had some officers assigned to patrol the busy areas during the summer season, so Manning Park, and just highlighting the risk of theft. Often people come to a place like Manning Park and think everything is fine and I can leave things sit on the seat. So just highlighting thefts and trying to prevent some things there. And there is some on the stats, some increase there in bicycle theft, break and enter business, and break and enter other. Not to blame it all on one person, but there was a significant offender who's doing a lot of crime in the Colmont area that was taken into custody back in early October, I believe it was, and they're still in custody on that. So that should help for Q4. On a police visibility perspective, this quarter did encompass Tulameen Days. There was a big police presence at Tulameen Days, August 2nd to 5th. Participation in some parades and activities there, and just a lot of presence to keep a lid on things. A member participated in story time at the Princeton Library on August 17th. There was the festival concert in Headley on August 10th, Rolling Barrage Parade on August 16th, Pancake Breakfast in Headley on September 8th. and a reconciliation dinner with a couple of the members and an employee on September 25th. And we also did a coffee with a cop in Headley. I can't remember the day, but it was back in October. Traffic and road safety, a lot of patrols in high visibility areas, including Manning Park, Highway 3. There was some construction in Ellison Flats, where there was a lot of presence there, and teamed up with BC Highway Patrol. And just targeted enforcement for traffic safety, including BC Highway Patrol, which did 494 contacts with the public in the Princeton area. On a employee wellness, we treat them very well. We do our best to. I'm such a nice guy. We do our best to support them, give them the time off we can, get them up on their training, and fill vacancies as we can. There's currently decent over there. We just got a new recruit in there who's being trained, so things are looking pretty good at Princeton, I think. Any questions or prove me wrong? I don't know.
Do you have any questions for?
No, just one comment, and if you can pass it on to BC Highway Patrol, thank you. The extra presence on the road has been noted, and it's, you know, was our big concern, so thanks a lot, because we've had those road closures and everything, and there seems to be a lot more cruisers out there, and people are slowing down.
Good, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. This was a very detailed report, and really appreciated. Is there any further questions in regards to Director Barkwell?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's sort of a regional-wide question. Last year, I participated with the Kinsmen and the ATV Club in a cleanup on the back road to Osprey Lake. And it was bizarre, the stuff, obviously stolen, that was laying there. I mean, we took truckload after truckload after truckload out of there. Are you well informed about the locations people are, these type of people? I mean, there was needles, there was, you know, everything. Or should we make a point, like, should I speak to the ATV Club saying, you know, if you see these type of people, let the RCMP know, or do you already know? And is there anything that can be done about it? Because I know it's just moving a problem from one place to another. So what's your thoughts on that?
Through the chair, definitely let us know. Generally, if something's been there a while, we'll probably know about it. If it's been there, we do visit these places. And depending what's going on, if there's stolen property, obviously we want to deal with that. If there's people with addiction issues that they need support, whatever assistance we can provide, we will. I can't say that we always know about them because there's always the first time we find out about it. So let us know. If it's been there quite a while, we probably know about it, but definitely let us know whether it needs our enforcement or our support or a little bit of both. We're happy to provide it. Let us know. But yeah, we do our best to know where all these things are and track them, but we always have to find out for the first time once.
Follow up?
Do you think there might be people that you're looking for out there? And, you know, so do you have names or anything when you do get aware?
Well, there's always a possibility, I suppose. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, there could definitely be people we're looking for, or people we're looking for in multiple ways, whether it's because of trouble with the law or because their doctor wants to see them or whatever. Certainly there's potential, but without knowing, you know, various locations, yeah, there's always that possibility.
Thank you. Any further questions? Well, not seeing any, I'd like to wish everyone and everyone at your detachments a Merry Christmas from the board here and a Happy New Year, because I'm assuming then we won't see you until that, and the new year.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So could I have, is there a motion to adjourn first? All in favor? All right. Thank you. Back to the chair.
Thanks, Director Roberts, and we'll just go straight back to Director Taylor to continue on with the environment once we get set up inside here again. So I'll just turn it over to you.
Okay, we'll resume, but I think we'll need 5 minutes to get the appropriate staff back in the room. Okay, I think we're ready to resume again. I'll call the committee back to order. We're at item C, Solid Waste Management Plan Report. And I believe we've got approximately half an hour to hear a report and review of the program. So over to the CAO for introduction.
Thank you. This report is to provide an update on the current status on all the landfill sites within the region, how these systems are working through the reality report, and current progress to the solid waste and management plan review. And the recommended motion is that the committee receive the current solid waste management system overview report as the first main deliverable in the solid waste management plan review. Staff's here with the presentation, I believe, and answer questions.
Yes, thank you. I'm just going to turn it right on over to our consultant from Tetra Tech Canada, Tamara Schulman.
Hello there. Adam, can you go ahead and share the screen? I don't want to cancel and restart. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to access it prior.
You should be able to share your screen, or I can get the presentation going either way.
Yes, please. Yes, please. So thank you all for having me. My name is Tamara Schulman. I'm a solid waste planner with Tetra Tech. I'm presenting on behalf of the team today. I have worked with Tetra Tech on solid waste management plans and various waste reduction initiatives since 2010. We'll go ahead to the next slide here. So for the agenda today, we're going to go through the solid waste management plan update, the process and the timeline. We'll also go through some of the highlights of the system that many of you are likely familiar with, so it'll be a good refresh. And then we will speak to some key priorities. Next. Next. So I'll resist polling the group for who was part of the last solid waste management plan, but I'm guessing it may have been on the radar for a few folks. Essentially, the intent of the solid waste management plan is to help serve as a long-term framework over time. The province does require that update to happen every 10 years through the BC Environmental Management Act. And so that's through now the Ministry of Environment and Parks. The name has changed. And it includes municipalities, electoral areas, and also First Nation communities. This planning process will guide how waste reduction and solid waste activities are carried out. It will use the pollution prevention hierarchy that you see to the right, and it will also include engagement through advisory committees and 3 consultation phases, as well as ongoing engagement with key collaborators. Most folks are familiar with that, the 3 R's. They continue to evolve. So if you look to the right, you'll see there's reduce, which also is about rethinking, redesigning, really understanding the front end of our system, at least to the extent that we can control it, which is usually on the purchasing side. Reuse related to how we share, reuse, repair, extend the life of our products. Recycle, as well as compost, keeping in mind what those uses are going to be as they're moving through and becoming inputs to a new part of the system. Recovery, sometimes it's energy recovery opportunities, depending on scale and material, and then residuals management, which is landfill in this case. Next slide. So there's many players who are involved in the process. At the core, you see the RDOS technical team, the solid waste department staff, the Tetra Tech staff, which I'm representing today. And then on the left, there's advisory committees, both technical and public, cross-departmental staff, oversight as fitting. And then at the bottom, you see that public consultation piece. We really want to have that feedback along the way and be able to incorporate that as we go, and I'll speak more to that. We also want the ongoing collaborator engagement, and that's with municipalities, First Nations, and other key players in the system. If you look over to the right, you see the eventually this will all come back. There'll be key touch points with the board, and then it will be the board that ultimately has the approval of the plan, and then it will go to the ministry for approval. Next slide. So the role of the advisory committees is to guide the regional district through the solid waste management planning process, the SWMP. A lot of acronyms in every sector and every part of utilities, so we'll try to at least spell them out the first couple of times and then avoid them when we can. The process is intended to help the group will help to support developing the consultation plan, the process, the materials, guiding principles, goals, and targets, options that are a long list, then a short list, then develop into the strategies and actions, terms of reference for planning studies, reviewing any reports or other things that they come, and then the actual plan. There will be interim dates, updates provided to the board throughout the planning process, and then the draft plan update will ultimately be forwarded for review and approval by the board. In this case, we are going to be having a technical advisory committee that consists of local government staff, again, regional, district, municipal, First Nation, other key collaborators that move materials through the system, to be able to do a deeper dive around infrastructure collection, some of the topics that need that in-depth extra work, and then the public advisory committee that will get that ongoing input, plus also be going through the process chaired by an elected official and then with members of the public. So we'll have ways that we bring those groups together, but we want to make sure that everybody gets to do the level of dive that's needed that we really optimize this opportunity to look at how to improve solid waste management for the region. Next slide. So there is a guide that's provided by the ministry, and so we do follow a 4-step process, as you can see in the image on the right. We're already underway. So and I'll go through a timeline in the next slide with more detail, but generally the process, you got to get it started, get the approval to proceed, start to put your committees together, set the plan direction. That's about getting your current reality together and understanding what's happening in the system, identifying areas for improvement, building options for step 3, and then evaluating them. Again, there's a feasibility work around understanding short and long-term costs, diversion potential, impacts on capital and operating costs, etc. And then for step 4 is to prepare and adopt the plan. As I mentioned, there's engagement around public consultation, ongoing engagement with collaborators, and then, of course, the committees that will meet several times throughout the process. Next slide. So here's how this looks in a little more of a help with a little more detail. So as you know, this has come through, and there has been some work that's been done so far this year. The project was initiated. There was an in-depth system analysis. There was some extra work to understand some of the curbside collection options. Often these plans they're programs that are still evolving and being developed as the planning process is happening. There's which is normal, and some additional preliminary planning. The Public Advisory Committee was also recruited. We're now putting materials out to expand a little bit just because we want to make sure that we've got a robust body as we are moving into this more active next phase of planning. So in the winter, we've met with the group in late October. We've gone through guiding principles. The ministry does provide some advisement on that, but we want to make sure it's customized for what's needed in the region. And then we're starting to talk about options development. You can see down below there in the peach color, the intent is to do a community survey because you want to get a sense of what people are, what people think about the system and what they want to see just at a high level. So we get that input up front, and then ongoing meetings. In spring and summer, we'll be going through that process of taking those long list of options and shortlisting them and looking at feasibilities I'd mentioned. Once we know what initiatives to pursue, then we're in a better position to set targets and understand the impact of those programs or the potential impact and some of the synergies. And then we'll start preparing for the phase 2 public consultation planning, which is really to take the options out and say, here's what we're proposing. We'd like your feedback, and to get folks familiar with what's being done. There'll be some touch points with the board, as the options are developed, and also before going out to consultation, she'll have a chance to weigh in. For the fall, that's where the consultation will be going out. That's the roadshow and the additional online information and the poster boards and that whole phase, as well as being able to build some of the plan. The plan, we're starting with the end in mind, right? We're using that current reality report and some of the options work plus the template from the ministry to make sure that we've got all the pieces in. And then in winter, there'll be any last adjustments to reflect that phase 2 consultation. It will go out again. Again, this is a press release out to web updates on web pages and to elected bodies for updates, and then it will come to the board for review and approval and go off to the ministry. Next slide. We'll go 2 ahead here. So let's transition to talking a bit about the system. There's quite a few components, right? We often think about trucks and it just going somewhere. We know that there's a source, right? There's generators and we all have a part in this system, whether it's from a single family home, multifamily, industrial, commercial institution, ICI, we say in the industry. Often in this setting, I'll say, it's really businesses and organizations ultimately, and also construction, demolition, and renovation, because a significant percentage of that material can come from renovation. So we know that waste is a social issue and a design flaw. Ultimately, we want to be able to use resources and have them cycle through and outputs become inputs. We're not all the way there yet, so we do have all these different ways that we handle the materials that come through our system. So we've got public and private hauling, depots. As we're doing collection, we have the transfer stations and those private depots and reuse stores and thrift stores and other places that help to cycle things through too. There's processing, material recovery facility, which can apply for construction and demolition as well as for recycling. Sometimes it just gets baled and moved along too, depending on the case. I know that that's the case for the recycling. Compost facilities, which we'll talk about more shortly. Sometimes there can be diversion technology, depending on scale and what's viable. And then off it goes to market and landfill. Next. So the map is what makes it relevant, right? In the region, there's 5 landfills, 2 transfer stations, 6 composting facilities, again, with different capacity around what material is being processed. It can be yard debris, there's some biosolids composting, and then there's food scraps. There's more food scraps composting that is emerging, but definitely a need for more. And then the construction and demolition MRF. Next slide. So this is a summary of the system at a very high level. There's been a lot of developments since the last plan with regard to policies and programs and facilities, and that is moving the needle in terms of supporting diversion. There's always more work to do. Every regional district in BC is trying to figure out how to continue to move that forward. So for garbage, we've got the 5 primary disposal facilities, and then with 4 public sector operators. Recycling, the residential curbside programs are available through municipalities and the regional district, and there's some development in those areas. Recycle BC subsidizes those programs. That's one of the product stewards. that essentially helps to make extended producer responsibility programs operational. And that means basically that the manufacturer or brand owner needs to be responsible for the end of life management so that it doesn't fall on the taxpayer. So we are unique in BC that we have several programs like that. And when we work with regional districts, we want to make sure that those programs are being optimized. Recycle BC is the only one that ties in for at a curbside level, but there'll be more conversation about those systems, and you've got a lot of really good things in place already around that front. We've got the ICI recycling, which again is in its earlier stages. There's some opportunities for sure because it's a big part of the waste stream. Composting, we talked about the yard and garden debris drop-off and some collection. Food scraps collection and processing is evolving. The C&D materials recovery facility, Okanagan Falls, is a big development. And there's also some pricing differential around rates to help optimize diversion. There's reduce and reuse initiatives through PACE, which also provides that inclusive circular employment and moves electronics along, supports C&D diversion. Again, other partners around thrift stores and reuse centers and online information and tips for residents. Next slide. So these are the 5 primary solid waste facilities, the municipalities and the electoral areas and First Nations that use each. So Campbell Mountain is the largest, Summerland, Oliver, Osoyoos, and Princeton. Next slide. So when we're looking at what to address during the plan, we use what the total tonnage is as well as what's in the garbage that could still be diverted. So these next 3 slides summarize that piece. So if you start from, there's a lot on this, so we'll walk through it. If you start on the left, you can see there's 101,000 tons of material being generated. If we follow the blue track on the bottom, you can see that almost half of it's getting diverted. That's positive. The green shows the organics that's getting diverted. A lot of that is the yard debris. It's not biosolids. Biosolids is not considered municipal waste. That is tracked differently. It's like the solid version from the liquids waste side. And then we've got the recycling diverted at almost 12,000. So then if you go up to the upper side there, you can see the disposed at the 52, almost 53,000. That means it's disposed as garbage. That doesn't necessarily mean it's all garbage. So, but first we're going to look at how it's broken out across sector, and then we'll look at what's in it. So municipal solid waste is the 38,000. And if you track that across, you can see there's 3 different residential categories: the urban single family curbside, rural, and also residential drop-off, which sometimes gets a little blurry with some of the construction and renovation. And then you can see the 19,000 and change with the C&D and multifamily because it gets collected on the same truck. So you can see that's about a 50-50 split roughly, which is similar to a lot of communities. The construction and demolition, if you look at that little piece coming out, it's a little lower than what we've seen in other communities, but it may be in part how the regional district is tracking, because I know there's a lot of growth that's happening. The other category, I put some examples on the side when we went into the data: agricultural plastic, burnt material, again from the wildfire, carcasses and other controlled waste, bulky items, wood that's preserved, painted, foundry dust, which is actually industrial, infested vegetation. It's a bit of a mix of things that don't fit cleanly in one sector. We'll still look at those, right? So that is the tonnage, right? The actual weight of things. If we go to the next slide, this is what's in the garbage across all those sectors. So basically the takeaway is about at least 65% of what's going into the garbage could be diverted through existing programs plus expanding food scraps. And that's about getting the capture and optimizing it and having the right systems in place and then minimizing contamination. So you can see compostable is the highest at 35. And from there you've got recycling, which in one of the studies was called drop-off, meaning that it's items that that aren't paper and container and what you would put in your blue curbside. The 11% that's recycling is your papers and containers, what you would put in your curbside container. 5% is product stewardship, the EPR programs we talked about, and then 37% residuals, which we are on the waste composition side starting to break out and put some estimates in place around what can be reused. And there's more initiatives happening on taking some of those things off before you get to the scale house. Next slide. So this is the extension of that other diagram that shows the residential, the different residential and the commercial side. So what we see here for the top three, the green bar, which is the compostable, that's for urban, rural, single family, and for commercial, for businesses and organizations. That's over 40% of the waste stream by weight. So that's really where our big opportunity is when we're looking and we see where we want to focus programs, which again is something that's known. You can see we did put an estimate in this updated version around reuse, and you can see that in the purple bar. And then for the blue for recycling, again, that's the curbside, you know, the paper containers. The orange is what you would take to drop off at different locations. Product stewardship is also other things you would drop off around town, ideally, and also at facilities, ideally in one-stop shops as much as we can. And then the black is the disposed as garbage. So it's a lot of info, but at least hopefully the takeaway is that there's diversion potential and a lot of opportunities still. Move on to the last slide here. There are a lot of opportunities and priorities, and this summarizes the top three that the advisory committees and that we'll be working with staff to do a deeper dive on. One is to optimize disposal efficiency across the solid waste system. So that is about prioritizing a strategy that will conduct waste disposal analysis, factoring in financial, environmental, and social considerations. There will be work done on that throughout the planning to identify some of those options and discuss it further. And then the intent is to have that deeper scoping study be part of the plan. Seeking ways to prevent waste in the first place. There's continually programs that regional districts can tap into and more work happening in this area. The circular economy business programs that recognize businesses need to manage risk around that linear make waste system and figure out how to make money and save money by looking at waste prevention. There's love food, hate waste campaigns. We know that about half of the edible food waste in the garbage is usually or half of the food waste in the garbage is edible. So there's repairing and sharing. There's a lot more that can be done. And then increasing on the systems and the infrastructure and services side and collection, there's more opportunities to reuse and divert across sector as it relates to having consistent programming across single family, multifamily, opportunities for ICI, through infrastructure services programs and policies, and that ties into materials, including organics, different things to be recycled, and then construction, demolition, and renovation. Next slide. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I'll pass it back.
Thank you, Ms. Schulman. Any further comments from staff to clarify, or should we jump straight into questions? Okay. Comments or questions from Director Holmes first?
Yeah, thanks very much for the presentation. I just wanted to ask about the public consultation and what is that going to look like? You mentioned like a road show, but I know in my community, if you have an open house on solid waste management, you'll probably get about 2 or 3 people out. So I'm just wondering, you know, exactly how that looks.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I'll give an initial answer and then pass over to staff. We have a consultation plan that outlines the various options and agreed that having standalone events can be challenging. We'll look for ways to be creative about dovetailing with other things that are happening and finding captive audiences and being creative and work with folks. I know that there's been some consultation already happening that's had some good turnout. So it's a little bit about how you pitch it and also, you know, when and where. So we'll be factoring those variables in as we're looking into it.
Further comment from staff?
Yeah, just excuse me, just to expand a bit, yeah, we'll be looking at using different media as well, like different, like newsletters or, you know, radio ad campaigns and regional connections. So there'll be different ways of reaching people as well.
Thank you. And I have Director Roberts and then Director Gilbert. Canola, sorry.
Thank you. And this is kind of a question that's, when I say the 30,000 foot stuff, it's asking in regards to incentive programs. Do we know if there's incentive programs at the federal or provincial level that goes to manufacturing? Because again, when we talk about the elephant in the room around creating a lot of this waste that we have, you know, you always come up with the fact that you had your Corningwell percolator for 50 years, but you go through your coffee drip machine every 2 years, you're throwing it out. So I'm wondering if there are incentive programs and things out there that are supported by provincial and or federal groups in regards to reaching out to manufacturing. Curious. Thanks.
Ms. Schulmer?
It's a great question. The solid waste management plan does look upstream in terms of wanting to advocate and work with senior levels of government to find opportunities. Often those are related, you know, that's been more lately around plastics reduction and right to repair and some of those types of policy tools. In terms of the manufacturer side, there are some initiatives that are happening around plastics and optimizing recycling where there's some industry side funding available. But that's something that is not always central to the plan, but making those opportunities available locally, I think, is important.
Thank you. Director Knodel.
Thank you. And through the chair, excellent proposal, Tamara. One of the things you touched on was the agricultural wastes, and currently due to the disaster in the farming industry in the last year or so, I was at the Oliver landfill and saw a surprising amount of agricultural plastics being delivered there, and I was told that was a small portion of what's coming. The attendant was used to work in the winery industry and said quite a bit more is still coming. Would it not be advisable to put this plastic to the side as it's neither compactable nor compostable, so its volume is enormous even though its weight is quite small? And the other, like there's both the plastic sheeting, the plastic pipe, and in some cases I've heard there's plastic wire spools that will be coming later. So all that plastic, I think, may have a value in recyclable when we get to the volumes that we're starting to look at. So I'm just kind of wondering whether it wouldn't be a good idea to put it to the side and not plug the landfill totally. The other product that is coming out of these replant programs is a huge number of treated posts. And one of the things that was brought to my attention is that currently the fencing companies that are dealing with forest fire area are using literally rail car loads of these treated posts. Could we not divert some of those back to like, if they come and take it away from us, they're doing us a service. That copper naphthalate kind of makes the posts toxic waste, but that's the posts that they're using in the bush to reestablish fencing. Perhaps it would be advisable to try to redirect some of that stuff to that area and save ourselves some issues. Just my thoughts. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
You make your presentation available to us, please. Thank you.
Yeah. Those are
Comments,
great pieces of feedback. Is it okay to comment?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Those are great pieces for the idea generation side, and ag waste is covered under a federal extended producer responsibility program that I know is in BC. So the clean farms. So that's something that there may be some activity already, but we can definitely have that on something to explore, and then noted regarding the treated posts as well.
Okay, Director Gilbert.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. I was just wondering if this plan will also look at options for, diverting waste at the homes as well, similar to like Nelson, BC, where they've were able to do a pilot project where they got food recyclers in the homes of people so that they were composting on the countertops and not having compost go into the bin and then be transferred to landfills.
Ms. Schulman?
That's a great question. It's come up a fair bit, especially since Nelson put their pilot together. There are a lot of options. Their situation is fairly unique in that they're in a very narrow valley where there's not a lot of composting opportunity. There's the bear dynamics that are quite pronounced in that area, and there's a multifamily focus for it when it's a little harder. So there's cost considerations around it for any public sector entity, and looking at the lifespan of those products and the full life cycle analysis of what you do at the end of their life. So there's a lot of considerations. I think it's something that will definitely be talked about in the committees. I know that it's come up, but it just needs to be, we need to look at what those economy of scale solutions are over time to get the optimal amount of capture. So that can mean diversifying the system, but we have to start there and then keep cost and ease of use at the forefront as we're looking at those options.
Okay, I've got a question myself, and then I have Director Holmes. I didn't see the Okanagan Falls landfill there, and there's a classification system, I guess, as to why that's the case. Can you just tell us that, Ms. Bloomfield or Ms. Schulman?
Yeah, when we were talking about the garbage, just municipal garbage doesn't get buried in Okanagan Falls. It's only a construction and demolition renovation site. So it doesn't necessarily always fit in with the other ones just because it is so unique.
All right. Director Holmes?
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering for the recycling, does that only look at the curbside program? Does it also look at returnables? Or is the returnables just, that's Recycle BC and it's got nothing to do with us? And the reason I ask is because, it's my understanding that in Penticton and Summerland, and I don't know about the south, but you can't get your full deposit back on returnable, like milk bottles or whatever, because it's all private. Whereas, in the North Okanagan, there is a place you can get your full deposit back. So our citizens are kind of being shortchanged. So, I'm just wondering if does this fit into this at all, or is that just outside our remit?
Ms. Schulman?
Yes, it doesn't get included, and when we're looking at the different sources of what's still in the garbage from that pie graph and the other pieces, you'll see that there was the product stewardship or programs that implement extended producer responsibility. So those programs are reviewed, and while they're not all run by the regional district or even municipalities, there's an opportunity to engage with product stewards to make sure that the regional district has the best services available. And that dance between the EPR programs and the private depots are something that we can look into and see if there's any other areas for optimizing, but we'd have to handle all the related sensitivities. It's a really good point that you're bringing up, though. Technically, there should be that deposit return opportunity.
Thank you. Any further, Director Roberts?
Yes, thank you. And this is a question for staff. Wondering in regards to the approved motion in regards to a review of our curbside pickup, and then what the information that's going to be done with this roadside and the roadside stuff that's going with curbside. Is a lot of this information of these things being gathered, is that something that is foreseen as being a part of that review process? Thank you.
Ms. Bloomfield?
Yes, that'll be one of the things, probably the main topic we'll be talking with a lot of people on, is to what they want to see. And yeah, we have to address it. We have to look at it, and this is kind of a good place to do it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, further questions? Seeing none, can I have a motion to receive the current Solid Waste Management System Overview Report is the first main deliverable in the Solid Waste Management Plan Review. Moved by Director Coyne, seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. No, I believe Director Conan's, no, Director Conan's would never be referred to as slow. But can I clarify that you are in favor of this, Director Conan's? Right. Okay, thank you. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. It's carried. Back to you, Chair.
That's it for the day. Thank you, everybody, for attending. See you all next week. Yeah, next week. Budget and strategic planning on Thursday. So just a reminder. I believe so. Just for clarity, it's here next week, right? Yes, okay. Just so nobody's sitting over at the Trade and Convention Center wondering where everyone is. It's here in the boardroom. See ya.